Welcome to the story of The Weight of a Grandmother's Curse. Ugomma was born under a roof of despair, but nurtured by the unconditional love of her grandmother, Nneka. Her mother, Juliana, a vibrant young woman, beloved by all, had tragically passed away shortly after giving birth to Ugomma. Juliana had entrusted her precious daughter to the care of her mother, a decision made in the final hours of her life. Though Nneka was already advanced in age, she took up the role to take care of Ugomma, her granddaughter, with fierce determination. The villagers often praised Nneka for her devotion. She worked tirelessly on her small farm, ensuring Ugomma had enough to eat. She sang lullabies to her at night, mended her clothes, and shielded her from the harshness of life. It was said that Nneka lived only for Ugomma, for the little girl was her last link to Juliana. But as Ugomma grew, the love that had cradled her seemed to wither in her heart. Ugomma's cruelty to her grandmother Nneka was unrelenting and took on a variety of malicious forms. Despite the love and sacrifices Nneka poured into raising her, Ugomma treated her with utter disdain. By the time Ugomma was a teenager, her behavior had shifted dramatically. The kind and obedient girl who once followed her grandmother everywhere became rebellious and defiant. Nneka's love, which had been her solace, was met with scorn. "Why are you always on my case?" Ugomma snapped one day when her grandmother asked her to sweep the compound. "Can't you do it yourself?" Her grandmother was stunned. The words pierced her heart, but she smiled weakly. "My child, I am getting old. My bones ache. Just help me a little. Ugomma rolled her eyes and stormed off, leaving the broom untouched. Over the years, her disrespect escalated. When her grandmother prepared meals, Ugomma often ate large portions of food or would devour the entire pot of food without a second thought. If there were any leftovers, she would maliciously mix sand, ashes, or dirty water into the food, ensuring her grandmother went to bed hungry. Ugomma consistently refused to do any work around the house, leaving Nneka, an elderly woman with aching joints, to handle everything on her own. Even when Nneka struggled to fetch water from the village stream or sweep the compound, Ugomma would lounge in the shade, eating fruits or playing with her hair. When asked to help, she would snap, "Am I your slave?" Ugomma set deliberate traps to harm her grandmother Nneka. On particular cruel days, she poured water on the mud floor deliberately, making it slippery so Nneka might fall, knowing that her grandmother's failing eyesight would prevent her from noticing the danger. When the old woman slipped and injured her hips, Ugomma stood over her laughing hysterically, mocking her frailty and showing no concern for her grandmother's pain. "You are so useless," Ugomma sneered one day. "Why don't you just die already?" Nneka's tears became her constant companion. She cried silently at night, her heart breaking for the child she had raised with so much love. "My daughter, Juliana," she would whisper to the stars, "what did I do wrong? Why is your child so cruel to me?" Words were another weapon Ugomma wielded against Nneka. She constantly insulted her grandmother, calling her old witch, useless woman, and burden. On several occasions, she mocked Nneka's frailty and slow movements, imitating her hunched posture and shaking hands to provoke laughter from others. The villagers watched Ugomma's behavior with disgust. They whispered about her wickedness, marveling at her audacity. How can a child treat her grandmother like that? They often wondered. When kind-hearted neighbors noticed Nneka's plight and tried to assist, Ugomma actively chased them away. She yelled at them, threatening violence if they stepped foot in their compound again. Once, when a neighbor came to deliver firewood, Ugomma threw the logs into a nearby bush, forcing the person to leave in frustration. Some brave souls attempted to intervene. They would sneak into the compound to fetch water for Nneka, or sweep the compound, or even bring food for her to eat. But Ugomma would chase them away. She was frighteningly strong, often boasting she could defeat 2 men at once. After a few bruising encounters, the neighbors learned to stay away. As Nneka aged, she needed support to move around and perform basic tasks. Instead of helping, Ugomma deliberately withheld aid. For instance, she once refused to lift Nneka onto her bed when the old woman complained of joint pain, leaving her to sleep on the cold mud floor. When her grandmother fell seriously ill, Ugomma ignored her cries for help. She refused to fetch herbs or call the village healers, leaving her to endure her illness alone. This neglect accelerated her physical health decline. Ugomma took joy in destroying objects that held sentimental values to her grandmother. For instance, when she found an old necklace that belonged to Nneka's late daughter, Juliana, she threw it into the fire, dismissing her grandmother's pleas to spare it. Ugomma had a habit of taking items that were precious to Nneka and either destroying or selling them for petty gains. On one occasion, she sold Nneka's only good wrapper, a cherished gift from Juliana, at the village market, and used the money to buy snacks for herself. The villagers muttered, "Let the old woman pray. Only the gods can save her from that devilish granddaughter." Nneka's health deteriorated rapidly. Her once strong frame became frail, her movements slow and labored. Yet Ugomma refused to lift a finger to help. Even when Nneka could barely rise from her mat, Ugomma left her to fend for herself. As her grandmother's condition worsened, Ugomma did not relent. She could barely move. Neighbors came to clean her hut and prepared meals for her. Ugomma fought with these neighbors, accusing them of meddling in her family affairs. She once overturned a pot of soup that a kind neighbor had cooked for Nneka, shouting that her grandmother deserved to starve. Nneka often wept quietly, overwhelmed by Ugomma's cruelty and the memory of her late daughter. Ugomma, instead of showing remorse, would laugh and mock her. "Crying won't bring my mother back," she sneered one day. "You are pathetic." One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky with hues of orange and gold, Nneka called Ugomma to her bedside. Her voice was weak but firm. "Ugomma," she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, "I loved you like my own child. I gave you everything I had. Why do you treat me this way?" Ugomma crossed her arms, a look of indifference on her face. "You are always complaining. I owe you nothing." Nneka's heart broke one final time. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Ugomma, you will suffer for your wickedness. No one will help you. and you will know the pain I have endured." The next morning, Nneka passed away. The villagers gathered to bury her, but they kept their distance from Ugomma, who stood aloof, showing no emotions. After Nneka's death, life changed dramatically for Ugomma. The villagers abhorred her cruelty, shunned her completely. No one spoke to her or offered her help. When she walked through the market, people turned their backs. At first, Ugomma shrugged it off. She believed she didn't need anyone. But as time passed, the isolation began to weigh on her. Her once bountiful harvest failed, and she struggled to find food. Desperate to escape the loneliness, Ugomma decided to leave the village. She wandered for days, finally settling in a faraway village where no one knew her. In the new village, Ugomma hoped to start afresh, but her grandmother's curse seemed to follow her wherever she went. She was met with hostility or indifference. When she asked for work, the villagers turned her away. "We don't need troublemakers," they said. Suitors who showed interest quickly lost their desire. Some claimed she smelled terribly, while others said she radiated an unsettling aura. When she goes to buy items at the market, nobody sold any item to her. Rather, they threw her money back at her face and mocked her for being wicked. Ugomma struggled to survive. She ate scraps from the market and slept in abandoned huts. When she fell ill, no one came to her aid. Alone and miserable, she began to reflect on her past. "Is this my punishment?" she wondered, tears streaming down her face. "Is my grandmother's spirit still angry with me?" Years later, a gaunt and hollow-eyed Ugomma returned to her home village. She hoped that time had softened the hearts of the villagers, but when they saw her, they turned away, their faces hard with judgment. Desperate for redemption, Ugomma made her way to her grandmother's grave. She knelt on the earth, her body trembling with sobs. "Grandmother," she cried, "please forgive me. I was young and foolish. I didn't realize how much you loved me. Please lift this curse from me. I can't bear it any longer." But the grave remained silent. She visited the grave several days, weeping, but the grave remained silent. Ugomma spent the rest of her life in misery and loneliness. As people rejected her companionship, she became a shadow of her former self, wandering aimlessly through the village. Her once beautiful face was marked by hardship, her body weakened by years of suffering. The villagers often told her story to their children, using it as a cautionary tale. "Respect your elders," they said, "or you will end up like Ugomma." In the end, Ugomma learned the lesson of kindness and gratitude too late. Her life became a testament of the consequences of cruelty, a reminder that the seeds we sow in our youth determine the harvest we reap in our later years. Thank you very much for listening.